So I got my hands on a pipette as a junior in high school, and it completely changed the trajectory of what I thought I wanted to do. It is such an integrated network that if you remove one piece of that network, the entire thing crumbles.
What do you think are some of the biotech trends that we'll start to see come out or that are happening now?
I also think we're on the verge of breakthroughs in personalized medicine. When I first read the job description for Director of Business Ops and Strategies, the very first line of the job description was "We empower scientists." So I think that being able to do the personal assessment of what am I good at, what are my strengths, and using my strengths to carry me through, but also keeping like a tally mark of, okay, where are my blind spots? When I step back now, I realize that I really kind of had that kind of startup experience, but it was under this kind of corporate umbrella, safe zone.
We can't dream what we don't see.
For every single company that we have in BioLabs, for all of those researchers, there's some kind of personal motivator.
By the way, shout out to your DNA earrings.
Thank you. Yes, I gotta channel my inner nerd here. Hi, I'm Gabby Everett, and you're listening to Tech Legacies Podcast.
What is the future of biotech, especially in the Dallas-Fort Worth area? You're going to want to watch this whole episode as we explore that with Gabby Everett. She is the Director of Business Operations and Strategy at BioLabs Pegasus Park. Welcome, Gabby. How are you?
I'm doing great today, Fanny. How are you?
I am so excited to have this conversation with you.
Also, I'm excited to be here.
So let's dive in. Throughout your career, what's been the best piece of advice that you've gotten?
So my career has been, a lot of different transitions. I went from academia, I went into industry, and now I'm working at BioLabs, biotech startup incubator. Each one of those has been very different transitions. So I think the biggest, greatest piece of advice would just be to go for it and not be afraid to try something different. I'm sure we'll probably get into this a little bit later on, but follow your heart and do what you think you're going to love.
I love it. Well, for those of our audience that are not familiar, tell us a little bit about BioLabs.
Sure. So BioLabs is a biotech startup incubator. So basically what that means is that we take baby biotechs that are spinning out of local universities or maybe independent companies, and they incubate with us at BioLabs. They use our shared space, they use our shared equipment, and they're able to scale and grow for a fraction of the cost. So people who may not know, biotech is extremely expensive. There are single pieces of equipment that you may use for your research that are $400,000. But if you start out and you've maybe won a pitch competition and you've won $50,000 or $100,000, it doesn't really go that far if you put that in context. So instead of companies having to spend $4 or $5 million of investor money on infrastructure, instead they can come to a place like BioLabs and scale for a fraction of the cost.
You're accelerating biotechnology.
We are. The company started up in the Boston-Cambridge area, so typically what you think of when you think like biotech hotspots is in Boston. And we're mostly located in the Northeast and in California, and this spot here in Dallas is our first and only, as of now, central U.S. location. So there's a lot of reasons why BioLabs selected Dallas for this spot, and we've been doing great. We've been there for about 2 years.
Well, to that point, why Dallas-Fort Worth? I don't normally associate biotech with Dallas,
right?
To be honest.
Well, and what's funny is that it really should be associated with the number of universities that we have here in the region. We've got like 6 or 7 tier 1 research institutions that are churning out incredible technology. They're turning out technology that is commercialized ready. They're churning out researchers who are capable of filling the workforce needs. And then we also have a pretty large investor base here in North Texas. So having those 3 legs of that stool here just really made sense for us.
Every time I'm just equally surprised at how much innovation and businesses are starting up in Dallas-Fort Worth. It's incredible.
Yeah, it really is.
Now, as you kind of, now you didn't always start off in this area,
Right.
right? You came from corporate,
Right.
right? Tell us
I
how
did.
you made that transition, or tell us about your start actually in corporate, and then why you decided to kind of make that transition.
Yeah, well, I always knew, just to go back, I always knew that I loved science. I went to
By the way,
museums.
shout out to your DNA earrings.
Thank you. Yes,
Love
I
it.
gotta channel my inner nerd here. So I always knew that I loved science. We would go to the Museum of Natural Science in Houston. We would go to NASA. So I love dinosaurs. I love space, and I didn't want to be a paleontologist because that's too much dust and you're cleaning things. Like I'm not going to clean for a career, right?
Yep.
And then, I love space, but I'm not going to be an astronaut because Apollo 13 was a little scary. But then I discovered genetics, and it's just the language of molecular genetics and biology is just something that spoke to me. It's definitely something that I resonated with. And when I was in high school, we took a trip to a lab at Texas A&M where they were cloning cats. And we took a tour of the lab. There was a researcher who was loading up a DNA gel, got to the very last lane, and then turned the pipette over to the group and said, okay, who wants to load the last lane? So I got my hands on a pipette as a junior in high school, and it completely changed the trajectory of what I thought I wanted to do. I didn't really know about bench science at the time, so I got exposed to it early. Went to A&M when I was about a junior in college. My Grammy contracted an antibiotic-resistant staph infection in the hospital, and my Grammy, she was my rock and my best friend, and to see that happen was it was horrible to see her go through that. She pulled through, so that's the good news. But that's what inspired me to go into bacteriophage research. So these are viruses that infect and kill bacteria. So I did a PhD studying those. My goal was to kill the little jerks that tried to take out my grandmother. But then I pivoted into industry after graduate school. I didn't want to stay in academics. And I knew someone at a local company, NCH Corporation, got in there. So instead of killing bacteria for a living, we were in the biotech division using the good parts of bacteria. So using them for environmental remediation, where I was in the probiotics division for a little while as well. I was there for about 6 years, and I really got to wear multiple hats and almost kind of experience what it's like to be in a startup where you've got one small group that's doing everything from product ideation all the way to post-commercialization support, working with people like the marketing team and the legal team, the whole process. I got to be there for first batch manufacture at our site in Prague, and I was there like with the manufacturing team, and so it was really cool. So when I step back now, I realized that I really kind of had that kind of startup experience, but it was under this kind of corporate umbrella, safe zone. So when it came time to shift from industry into like startup world, with like pharmaceutical kind of, people doing pharmaceutical R&D, it was a little challenging and a little intimidating, but it was definitely the right next step.
Gosh, I want to break that down in several ways, because there's so many things that you said that I want to touch on. Well, first of all, the fact that, and it's a similar experience with me, that somebody came to us in high school and showed us what's possible.
Yeah.
And then from there, it just changes the whole trajectory of our lives.
Yeah.
Right? Like we can't dream what we don't see.
Exactly.
Right? And I know one of the things you do now is have programs for kids, right? Girls and boys to learn STEM right from, is it elementary or all the way through high school?
We typically work with middle schoolers and high schoolers. For the middle schoolers, it's really more about that kind of STEM engagement and getting them excited and let them see what's possible. With the high schoolers, it's really about career exploration and really kind of giving them the same experience that I have, because like you said, if you don't see it and if you don't know what it is, then you can't be it. And who knows what kids are coming through there. You know, there could be the next person that works on the next cancer therapeutic or antimicrobial to save somebody else's Grammy, you know? So it's really cool to bring those students in, show them the possibility of what can be. And it's from a startup perspective. So you fold in entrepreneurship in there, and some of these kids, they might be the ones that start the next company. So being able to show them that pathway forward and like the tangible pathway of here's how you can do it too, it's a lot of fun.
And just holding things, right? The experiential learning side of it. A pipette, you mentioned, right? So then from there, was it difficult going from corporate to kind of like a startup world, and what went through your mind to make that transition?
You know, it was really interesting. So when I first read the job description for Director of Business Ops and Strategies, the very first line of the job description was "We empower scientists," and that's really kind of I would guess a theme throughout my entire career so far has been trying to excite and engage and empower scientists. So it was really easy to read that job description. I'm a very social person as well, so this is a very outward facing role. A lot of people, when they think bench scientists, they think lab rats who are stuck in the basement lab and they're at their bench and they're pipetting and, you know, that kind of mad scientist persona. But I love engaging with people, and, you know, like with you, I love talking to people. So in reading that description, it definitely sounded like the right move to me. But because I'd never been in that sort of pharma startup space, I have to admit it was a little intimidating. It was a little intimidating. And I remember, it's funny, I remember talking to my husband about it, and this was after going through the interview process, and I was looking through the listings of all of the other site heads, and I'm like, well, you've got a doctor of veterinary medicine, you have people who have started companies before, you have people who've had lead scientist, principal scientist roles in pharmaceutical companies, you've got angel investors, you've got people who've been through technology transfer offices at universities, and I remember thinking, these people are all powerhouses. Why on earth would they want me? And my husband just looks at me and he's like, really? You can be there too. That's why they want you. So it was really great to have that kind of support system. And going back to that first question of you know, what advice and go for it, I think a lot of that, you really need to have the right support system around you. And I did.
Well, and honestly, I know a lot of people that are in career transition or thinking about making a career pivot but not sure. And what would you say to them based on what you've gone through?
I would say definitely don't be afraid to try. I know, you know, women especially are more likely to look at a resume and highlight all of the qualifications that they don't have and let that trick them to not going for it and not putting themselves out there. But you never know until you get into that position. So I would say go for it.
Love it. So can you give us an example or a few maybe of some of the startups or some of the innovations that are happening at BioLabs?
We've
whatever you can say.
Yeah, absolutely. So
like
we've got so much, so many exciting things happening there. And just to give you a little bit of taste of the success of BioLabs, like I said, we've been there for 2 years. When we first started and we did our trajectories and where we thought we would be as far as occupation, in year 2, we only anticipated maybe about 30% occupancy. If we had 5 to 6 companies, that would be successful. But instead, 2 years later, we've got 19 companies and we're 85% occupied. And it's very diverse across the board. We've got everything from cancer therapeutics all the way up to wearable medical devices. I mentioned my Grammy previously. Ultimately, she passed away from triple negative breast cancer, which was, you know, it's just a tragic diagnosis. And the reason why is because there are no cures for it right now. However, one of the companies at BioLabs has a small molecule compound that attacks the Achilles heel, basically, of triple negative. So it's very rewarding for me to be able to do what I do and enable a company like Atira RX to do what they do. They start clinical trials later on next year. So that's one of our big success stories. We've got another. Oh, go ahead.
It's like you coming full circle.
It really is. It really is. We've got another company in the lab. It's an independent company, a wearable medical device called Articulate Labs. And they have this wearable medical device that does electrical stimulation to the musculature around the knee to help speed up the recovery process after things like ACL, MCL surgery. We also have companies doing amazing things. We've got Colossal Biosciences with us. We've got a local company, OncoNano, that's with us as well. We've got Recode Therapeutics that's doing drug design, drug delivery for respiratory diseases. And the list goes on and on. There's so much cool stuff. And again, it's very diverse. We've got companies from all over. They're doing everything of all different sizes. So to see the interactions of those companies and the researchers and the CEOs in action and seeing how that gets compounded is really cool.
I want to pause real quick here and give a special shout out to one of our sponsors, CG Infinity. I've worked with them for several years now, and I can truly say that they have one of the best workplace cultures that I've ever experienced. And they specialize in a variety of industries, especially energy, utilities, and financial services. And they serve them through their Salesforce, cloud, as well as customer experience services. So thank you, CG Infinity. And I hope you'll support them as they have supported us here at the podcast.
And I bet you see maybe like random collaborations happening that wouldn't have happened if they weren't in this kind of co-working, experimenting space.
Yeah.
Right? Have you seen any examples of that where like two companies that would have never met each other or collaborated, suddenly something sparked out of that?
I have. I don't think I can say very much about it, but yes, we have a local company here. The technology was a spin out from SMU, and then we had a company with us from California, and they were working right next to each other and then realized that they could kind of play off of each other's technology to do something really cool in diagnostic space. So that's really neat to see. It's really great to see the CEOs working together and collaborating and sharing business development strategies of, man, I really need a consultant in regulatory. Hey, do you know anybody? Well, actually, yes, I do. Here's the card of, you know, my regulatory consultant. Give her a call, and yeah.
So many like serendipity moments, basically.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for those of you in the audience, and we'll put like lots of photos up throughout this episode so you can get a glimpse into BioLabs. It's just a fascinating space. Like when I was walking through it and just seeing, I mean, I only had a concept of co-working spaces, but then to see all the lab equipment and the experiments, like the geeky girl in me was just like ecstatic in there.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and it's really cool to also see how the researchers work together as well. I've got this fantastic photo of people from 4 different companies standing around one of our pieces of equipment, all like sharing thoughts on best practices and looking at data together. So it was really neat.
So since you're in this world now, and there's so much happening, you're having collaborations with local research centers as well. What do you think are some of the biotech trends that we'll start to see come out or that are happening now?
I think that one of the biggest trends is really going to be the convergence between technology, specifically AI and ML, and biotech. So we're already starting to see a lot of those partnerships. So I think that using AI and ML to inform drug development is a big thing that's on the horizon right now. And then I also think we're on the verge of breakthroughs in personalized medicine. We have a really great local company, Caris Life Sciences, that does precision personalized medicine as far as taking tumor biopsies and testing it along a panel and being able to inform your oncologist what therapy would be best for you. So those kinds of things are
Highly
what's-
customized solutions. right?
Exactly.
So at this point in your career, what's been kind of a hard lesson learned and how you kind of navigated out of that?
I think that one of the hardest things that I've had to overcome is I don't want to necessarily say a knowledge gap, but like I said, I came from an industrial microbiology lab.
Yeah.
There's a lot really that I wasn't exposed to in startup life as far as series funding, and in even the regulatory environment and how clinical trials work. So a lot of that is part of what I do now. So I had to basically train myself. I had a lot of learning to do. So I think that being able to do the personal assessment of what am I good at? What are my strengths? And using my strengths to carry me through, but also keeping like a tally mark of, okay, where are my blind spots? Anytime I was in a
Yes.
meeting and, people would throw around different concepts and phrasing that I didn't understand, I'd always make a note of what that was and then make sure that I go back and teach myself that. So there was a lot of that going along the way.
And like basically, and I find that it's like that with me as well. The older I get, the more I just realize I'm never going to know everything, but then trusting that we'll figure it out.
Exactly. And I think it's also important to surround yourself with the right people. I mean, I think you should definitely consider people as your resources.
Yeah.
I can't possibly keep track of everything that's going on in our region. So we've got connections in the Dallas Regional Chamber. So shout out to Kelly Cloud. She was one of the first industry-specific vice presidents that the Dallas Regional Chamber hired, and she's VP of Life Sciences. So just to show you kind of how, I guess, the broader region is really invested in what we're doing in biotech and life sciences. We also have a really great local group, Bio North Texas, which is an affiliate of a large national organization, trade organization that have all of our, other service providers that surround biotech, as well as the vendors and the companies themselves, all belong to this organization. So I've got a lot of really great partners that I work with that I can use to fill in some of those gaps.
It's
Call
such
in
a-
reinforcements if I need to.
Yeah, like a huge support network, basically.
Absolutely. Well, and it's interesting that you say that, because what the word we use to describe this thing that we're building is ecosystem. And it's very
better.
much
Yeah.
an ecosystem.
Yeah.
It is such an integrated network that if you remove one piece of that network, the entire thing crumbles. So yeah, we are developing a really strong ecosystem here in North Texas, and the other regions are starting to take notice. So that's been really cool too.
It reminds me, I just started reading a book and by Dan Sullivan, the strategic coach. And the title of the book is Who, Not How.
Ooh, I love that.
So it's like you get to a point where it's who can help me solve the problem the best.
Yeah.
And then just lean into their strengths. And then we
Exactly.
just partner with them.
The power of networking.
Yes. Well, speaking of that, how has networking helped you with your career development?
It's really helped out a lot. So when I was at A&M deciding what to do next, like I mentioned, I had someone that I knew at NCH Corporation. So I remember texting him and saying, hey, I see that you've got a spot open. Do you think this would be great for me? And he messaged me back immediately and said, yes, submit your resume. So, a couple of weeks later, I had the job offer. And while I didn't know anyone going into BioLabs, I had a strong LinkedIn presence, I would say, and really had my profile filled out pretty well, so that when the executive recruiter for BioLabs pinged me on LinkedIn and said, hey, we think you'd be perfect for this position because of X, Y, and Z, that put me in a good spot for that. So I would definitely say that leveraging my network helped out a lot. But I will say there's a caveat to it, in that who you know only gets you in the door.
Yeah.
It's what you do after you've gotten in the door that really helps launch you into success in a particular position. So there's a
Yeah,
balance.
it's a
to that
twofold
network.
thing.
Yeah,
Yes.
it really is.
So of all these projects that you've had, what are you most proud of?
I think that really the success that we've seen at BioLabs is something that I'm very proud of. I think it's something that the entire region is proud of, to be able to talk to companies that are thinking about making the transition out of academics from UT Southwestern, UT Arlington, UT Dallas, all of our fantastic universities that we have around here, talking to them, showing them the lab, and just seeing their eyes light up when they realize, wow, we can do this. Yeah. So I think it's that being able to empower the science and enable the companies to be successful. I think that's been the most rewarding thing for me.
And you're literally changing and saving lives with the companies that you're empowering, the scientists you're empowering.
Exactly.
For those girls and young women that may not be certain of what they want to do, but they're interested in science, what would you say to them to kind of nudge them to explore biotech?
I think everyone has a personal story and everyone has a personal motivation. For example, I was just at a judge at the Big Ideas competition that UT Dallas puts on every year. And one of the startups that won the largest share of the money was a company that analyzes hearts. And when we asked the guy, what is it about this company that motivated you? He said, my father had 3 heart attacks.
Oh my goodness.
And for me, it was my Grammy. And for every single company that we have in BioLabs, for all of those researchers, there's some kind of personal motivator. There's an intrinsic motivator. So I think if anyone is interested in science, think about what it is that you're interested in, think about your why, I would say. I'm a huge Simon Sinek fan, so I'm all about find your why. And use your personal stories and your personal motivators to propel you forward, because that's what's going to keep you going when your proof of concept experiment crashes and burns for the 3rd time in a row. You have to have that kind of pick-me-up that keeps you going.
That reminds me, like, there's so much failure, right, that can happen in experimentation, and yet it could be the 51st experiment or like the 89th one that finally works or clicks, right? What kind of advice would you share, having seen these kind of crashes or like just heartaches, right, when it comes to experimentation?
The very first thing that I think of is Thomas Edison and the light bulb. It wasn't the first light bulb that worked. It was the 10,001 light bulb that worked, right? And when asked about all of these failures, it wasn't, I didn't find the one that worked. I found 10,000 that didn't. I think that if you have, not to be cheesy, but a growth mindset and find something that you can learn from every failure, that's going to help inform your next iteration. So I think that it's also important to start with the end in mind. And with what we're doing in healthcare and biotech, yes, 80% of startups, maybe even more, end up failing. But one, we learn from those failures. A lot of times those failed CEOs pick up, dust off, and pursue their next project, and they continue to move on, and they're entrepreneurs. That's what they do. But for a lot of them, what keeps them motivated, like I said, is that intrinsic why, is that I can have all these failures, but in the end, I'm going to think about the patients and the families that this technology could potentially help.
Okay, so Gabby, we have a tradition here.
Okay.
One of my favorite podcasts is Diary of a CEO.
One
Do you
of my
like them?
faves too. Oh, yes.
Oh, he's awesome. And so we have these conversation cards, which are basically questions that other CEOs, celebrities, industry leaders ask each other.
Oh, wow.
And so we are going to randomly have you pick a card and answer the question on the card.
I'm going to take the bottom one.
Ooh, okay.
Do I read it?
Yes.
Is there something right now you know you're doing wrong, but you haven't fixed yet? If so, how will you get unstuck? Oh my goodness.
Moment of vulnerability.
I can't think of something right now. You know you're doing wrong, but haven't fixed yet. I think that what I've been working on for this past 2 years has really been building the ecosystem and getting companies here in North Texas. I think the next thing that we really need to do is be more intentional about the programming and what we're doing to help our current companies succeed and making more of those network and connections. I think that's what's on the horizon.
I love it.
Not necessarily something we're doing wrong,
Yeah.
but just a shift in mindset.
It's the next step.
It is
right?
the next step.
From startup, you're now moving to scale up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's a good one.
Thank
Okay. Gabby, what do you want your legacy to be?
So, somebody once told me not to hang my personal value and my own self-worth on what somebody else thought. I think that we all, at some point in our careers and our lives, have that little voice in the back of our head that says you can't do it. And sometimes that little voice is put there by somebody else, and sometimes that voice is self-imposed. So if I can inspire just one person to ignore that little voice that says you can't, or you're not cut out for this, or you don't have the chops. If I can inspire someone to ignore that voice and go for it, then I would consider that a good legacy.
Beautiful. Thank you, Gabby.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you for sharing your insights, your passion, which I feel so strongly, and then your personal stories.
Thank you.
You're doing great things here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area and beyond. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank
And
you.
for those of you that this episode resonated with, be sure to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And if you're listening to this on Apple, Spotify, please be sure to leave some feedback and let us know what questions you want me to ask the guests so that we can continually improve. We'll see you next time on Tech Legacies.
At Tech Legacies, we're all about helping technology professionals grow and succeed in their careers by sharing the advice of top technology executives. If you're looking to take your career to the next level and become a technology executive yourself, we have an exciting program to tell you about. It's called the Tech CXO Excellence Program by Tech CXO Launchpad, and they are our partners. They're offering an immersive, multimodal program developed and taught by current and former CIOs and CTOs who are passionate about building the next generation of C-suite technology executives. And you'll experience a full immersion into the C-suite world and also get to collaborate, network, and experience capstone-style projects with other professionals. And this is all while benefiting from face-to-face interactions in person with industry guest speakers. It is exclusively for a new level of C-suite executives and C-level direct reports and second directs who are earmarked for succession planning and career growth. To join their waitlist, register your interests at www.techcxolaunchpad.com. That's techcxolaunchpad.com. This program has everything you need to take your career to the next level.